Now, in December, the Greens supported legislation to give the government the power to set caps on the prices of gas and coal. Not caps on rents, unfortunately, but hey, we'll come back on that on another day. This regulation is a result of that. So from the outset, I want to make it clear that the Greens support cracking down on the unscrupulous conduct of the gas cartel, and this gas code does have many important features that we support. We support shifting negotiating power away from the gas cartel and supporting large industrial users who've been screwed over by gas exporters since the East Coast was opened up for exports in 2015. We support the transparency changes so that we can better see what's happening in what is otherwise a very murky gas market. We also support using the code to divert gas destined for export to be used here while we transition off gas. But what we cannot and will not vote for is using this gas code to encourage the opening up of new gas fields that are cooking our planet. We cannot support throwing more petrol on that fire. When the government announced this gas code on the 14th of June, they said in their media release, quote, "The gas code will ensure Australian gas is available for Australian users at reasonable prices, give producers the certainty they need to invest in supply." End quote. In this same week that the Climate Minister will announce how they're falling just short of their 2030 target, expected to be announced on Friday, and which I note itself is aligned more to 2 degrees of warming than it is to 1.5, which of course would be catastrophic for the planet. So in that same week, the Albanese government are going to again vote to support new gas fields. What part of no new coal and gas does this government not understand? Now, we are conscious that there's a gas shortfall hitting the East Coast market from 2027 onwards and that something needs to be done about it, but there are 3 things that the government could do in the 4 years that we have to prepare for that. They could increase supply through new toxic gas fields. They could reduce demand by electrifying homes, businesses and industry. And they could divert existing gas supplies away from the LNG industry, which is the biggest user of gas in this country, and fill the supply gap that way. But it seems like the government is putting all of its energy into simply opening up new gas fields, and it's completely neglecting the importance of getting Australia off gas and lowering energy bills as a result of doing so. We do have the time. Germany, for example, reduced their gas use by 18% in 1 year when Russia invaded Ukraine. They did this through installing heat pumps and through energy efficiency. Now, we've got 4 years to do what they managed to do in 1 year, but what we don't have, seemingly, is the political will. The government can also go harder in making sure that Australian gas stays here while we transition off it. Take, for example, the QLNG terminal in Gladstone, which is owned by Santos, a well-known donor to this government and also to the opposition, I might add. Santos are currently buying up to 22 petajoules out of the domestic market to meet their own contractual shortfalls. So they jumped the shark on their own contract promises, and now they're chewing up uncontracted gas to meet their own overblown commitments, and everybody else is suffering. Santos screwed up their own contracts, and now they're sucking gas out of our market to export overseas. Very nice for them, not so great for Australians. Now, it's not a sovereign risk to let Santos deal with the mess of their own making. That is not sovereign risk. If we let them keep taking our gas, then it's the Australian people's mess to clean up, and they'll be the ones paying higher prices. But because if we took action that would disadvantage Santos, well, it's a bridge too far for this government, and they're going to bend over backwards for Santos and leave the mess with the Australian people to deal with. The government has a number of options. It could also tighten the baselines of LNG terminals under the safeguard mechanism. If they electrified the compressors they use to convert gas to LNG, to liquid natural gas, it could free up a staggering 92 petajoules a year. So there's many options, but this government needs to focus their minds on how we use less gas, and yet it seems like all they want to do is open up new gas fields. So they've drafted a code of conduct that applies a price cap that says, oh, you don't have to meet the price cap if you open up new supply. Now, farmers around the country are pulling their hair out. First Nations owners around the country are pulling their hair out. They've seen the damage that coal seam gas and other unconventional gas has already done to farmland, to our groundwater, to the climate, to agricultural productivity, to culturally sensitive areas. They've seen that damage, and they don't want new gas fields. They don't want what's left of the beautiful farmland in the Darling Downs, for example, where I just was a couple of days ago, wrecked by more coal seam gas. So I'm yet to find a supporter of this proposal that there's a gas cap that you can avoid if you open up a new gas field, except, of course, Santos. They would love this. And as big donors to the government, perhaps they've written this gas code like they've written previous bits of regulation. Now, as I just mentioned, I was in Toowoomba on Thursday, and I want to commend the Toowoomba Regional Council for being the 6th council now in Queensland to declare a moratorium on new coal seam gas operations. Now, it's some of our best soil in that area, and in the 13 years that I've been representing the state of Queensland, I've been out there many times and I've observed the beauty of that black soil and the productivity of it. And I think we've even had folk from other political parties who've taken an interest in this issue as well, which is great. Finally, the council have said the farmers don't want this. They don't want new coal seam gas wrecking their farmland and poisoning their aquifers or dewatering their aquifers, particularly when there is still no legal right for landholders, for traditional owners, for councils to say no to coal seam gas or coal on their land. I've had a private member's bill to do that since 2011. It has been voted down more times than I can remember, at least 5, even though it's actually in the LNP's party platform, or was at some point. They kept voting against their own policy. So not only do farmers not have, and traditional owners not have the ability to actually say, no, I'd rather use my land for productive agriculture, or I'd rather simply just continue on to exist in this beautiful agricultural area rather than have Santos come in and ride roughshod, or whoever it is, whichever multinational gas company it is that's eating up the land and poisoning the water and polluting the climate. But they don't have that legal right to say no. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank the Toowoomba Regional Council for belatedly, but really in a well-done fashion, finally representing the interests of their constituents. And as the 6th council that's now done so, that sends a really strong message, both to the state government, who are also in cahoots with the gas industry, but it sends a strong message to the federal government. Councils don't want this. They don't want new gas fields. Farming communities don't want new gas fields. Traditional owners don't want new gas fields. Nobody wants the land wrecked and the water poisoned or the climate polluted. Just for the sake of the private profits of Santos and their other gas mates? What kind of a dodgy outcome is that? Like, what are we meant to be here for? Who are we meant to be representing? I know some of the people in the government used to work for Santos, but you're not meant to work for them now. You're meant to be in here representing the people.
Senator Santos.
Well, I think I'm not sure if I will name them, but I think those speaking out right now know exactly where they used to work, and we all know too. I'm sick of the fossil fuel company running this parliament. I'm sick of the donations that they make that buy influence on this parliament. I'm sick of the regulation being written by them in a way that creates loopholes for them, and everybody else is sick of it too. So we've got a gas code here that does do some good things, but the absolute flaw in this code is that it will incentivise the opening up of new gas fields, and the Greens just cannot support that. We will never support new coal, oil or gas. We're in a climate crisis, folks. What more scientific evidence do you need? How many more natural disasters do you need us all to experience before the penny will drop that you can't fix this issue by making it worse? We've seen Minister Bowen, who has given a bit of a sneak peek of what is going to be announced on Friday, that you're not going to meet your greenhouse gas reduction targets. We've seen an announcement late last week that you'll underwrite more renewable energy to help meet that target, which you're also on a shortfall to. And yet now you want to write a code that essentially incentivises the gas companies to open up new gas fields. I mean, I'm sorry, it just does not add up. You can't say you're taking climate action and at the same time tick off on almost every coal mine that crosses your desk and facilitate new gas fields being opened up. Nobody is fooled by that, and they are sick of the mining companies and the fossil fuel companies in particular running this parliament. So we will not be supporting this gas code of conduct, and we are moving to disallow it. And I might just add that in this place, in our last sitting week, we had a debate about the water trigger, which currently applies to coal seam gas but does not apply to unconventional gas, so to the shale and the tight gas that exist in the Northern Territory and in Western Australia. Currently, their water is not protected at all by federal environmental laws. And the Greens, again, have a bill to fix that and to extend that protection to all forms of gas extraction, so to include all unconventional gas in that water trigger. And the timing of that could be quite nice. But rather than seeing the government deliver on expanding a water trigger, which I might add is in their party policy, but we're still waiting for the delivery of that one, rather than acting on that, they're racing through new gas fields. And it harkens back to 2013 when the initial water trigger was introduced, a week after the then Minister, Minister Burke, who was Environment Minister at the time, ticked off on 2 massive coal seam gas fields and then 7 days later decided we needed a water trigger. Well, the people are alive to how much influence the fossil fuel companies have on this parliament, and they're fed up with it. They'd like their democracy back. They want you to stop taking the dirty donations from these companies that so poison your decision-making. And they'd like to see their water protected. They'd like to have affordable energy to run their homes and businesses. And they'd like you to look at supporting businesses to transition off gas, not to create back doors to prop up Santos's private profits. That is not your job anymore. Your job is here in this place now, and you're meant to be representing the people, the public interest, and trying to protect the climate. So we'll be disallowing this gas code, and we invite others to join us in doing so.
Authorised by L. Waters, Australian Greens, Canberra.